Hello everyone, so today's deck was created by Xunzzz, or at least popularized by him. He ran it up to rank number 1 on the Asia ladder, has an absurd amount of SP already. I think it's over 11,000, which is so crazy because I'm still at like 8,000, and that gap is huge, and he was able to run that using this list. And so today's deck is more of a modern take on Sarah control. It kind of takes away some of those clunky, very heavy counterplays that are, one, really hard to hit consistently, and two, they're retroactive. So if your opponent plays, you have to do it after the fact, so it's really hard to consistently get the value from things like Shang-Chi and Enchantress. This one cuts those pieces and opts for a little bit higher power while still having some control elements of things like Killmonger, things like Shadow King, huge value in Shadow King right now. We have Red Guardian, which has value in spades as well, against Iron Man, against Dracula, against so many cards, and Angela that they just dropped. You can take away that ability. So many uses for Red Guardian. Fantastic value card when you're looking to control the state of the board. We have Nocturne to kind of control locations a little bit. We have Miss Marvel as that sneaky way to reach power into additional lanes. We have Gladiator, good high value card. There's not a lot of decks that run very many things that beat him. And so you can always drop Maximus into Gladiator to force them into drawing the rest of their cards by the end of the game or on the last turn of the game so that Gladiator doesn't really have to face up against anybody. We also have the Mobius, which when he works, if he goes up against a deck that uses some heavy card reduction, so a pixie deck, a lot of decks that use like Wave, sometimes even Sarah decks themselves that are leaning very heavily on that discount, Mobius can absolutely ruin their day. And a lot of times you're going to get one cube retreats just off of those decks that typically want those card reductions. He's also great for Loki matches. Loki has an absurd amount of cost reduction, and he completely counters that. We have Invisible Woman primarily as a way to hide an early Maximus, to hide Miss Marvel, so that they don't know that extra 5 power is going to be to the left or to the right or both. It's very hard to calculate whenever you're looking at just the amount of power that's on the board to anticipate the Miss Marvel coming down. And then one of my personal favorite cards in this list, I saved it for last, Ronan. Ronan is a card that does not get much play. He doesn't see much value. He's never seen a lot of high competitive value, and this deck wants to run him, and it does so very, very well. Being able to hide the Ronan or drop him on the last turn after you've already hidden a Maximus is going to guarantee that you have at least 9 power in that play if they had completely emptied their hand. A lot of times they're going to have at least 2 more, so you're looking at a 14 power 5 cost, which when that is a surprising swing, is so hard to anticipate. Nobody sees a card behind Invisible Woman right now, at least, and thinks Ronan. And so this was ran up to rank number 1 in the world this season, and I had a lot of success with it. My win rate is slightly over 60%. You have to work on cube mitigation and capitalizing on those potential retreat games early, and then mitigating those that you're going to lose. This deck doesn't do great against the Hela matchup. So if you're seeing a lot of Hela, this doesn't have a lot of direct counters. Maybe you find a way to work in Cosmo, but that's still kind of a prayer. It just can't compete with the power that deck can push out. If you see that they play a discard card and you don't have the most optimal line, sometimes you want to retreat from that match and just save the hassle, save the extra cube. But everything else, it felt like I had a solid chance against, because you have those control tools in place that you can ramp out power early if you need to, you can save it for late, you can counter or control what the opponent's wanting to do, and there's just so much value in those cards. I do think this is a relatively tight 12 cards because it's really hard to outvalue any particular one by switching it out for another role player. If you don't have Red Guardian, you might be able to make do with another card similar, but no card is going to do exactly what Red Guardian does. You're going to be quite a bit less optimal if you don't have the Red Guardian. Nocturne feels like it could be decently replaceable, but location control is so important at kind of ripping away those surprise locations from time to time. Then everything else in the deck has been out for a while, and so I think it's relatively attainable. We're going to go ahead and jump over into a couple of games before I go any longer winded. Thank you guys as always for being here. Thank you Xunzzz for creating the deck. If you want to follow or see more of their content, I'm going to leave their Twitter or X link in the description below. Definitely go check them out. They always have some spicy builds. We're going to jump over into a couple of games. I hope you guys enjoy. It's going to be 6. Even though it's going to have its full power, it's also going to have its full cost. Okay, so a Maximus mid. They did get a copy of our Maximus, unfortunately. So that comes down at 16, bringing them to 34. This middle location is going to be a tough sell. We have the Miss Marvel coming in at 8. We have our Maximus that's going to be just 12. And then we do have Gladiator that's going to come in at 16. And so we are going to overcome that middle location. We hold down the right location. And sometimes it is going to be just that easy. This deck doesn't feel like it has any super cohesiveness except for the counterplays. But those counterplays are so strong on top of putting good value on the board every single game. And that's where you're going to find your wins. We're going to go ahead and take the 2. Let's jump over into the next one. All right, next up we have Tadig. The first location is TVA. A little bit unfortunate, but depending on what they play, maybe we just leave TVA in the game. If they have 1-cost cards, we have Killmonger to counter that on turn 3 or turn 4. So the Nova, very interesting. We do have Nocturne to potentially change that TVA location away if we want to, but it really comes down to if we think we can win on turn 4 or not. If we think we can, then we're just going to leave it. And it could be that we throw Nocturne down to make them think that we're going to not in the game. Oh, wow. That's kind of unfortunate. I'm going to go Nocturne into Dark Dimension. Both of these locations are going to hide our cards. I'm going to go Nocturne into Dark Dimension. They have Sebastian Shaw, and so we're actually going to get some really great value here in the Shadow King, bringing this back down to 4, so it's a max. We have currently 5 there. I think we're going to do this. Even with a Killmonger, I think we win. And if they somehow buff this up, maybe they just drop Silver Surfer, we're going to be able to come over the top of the Sebastian Shaw. So let's go ahead and snap into it. See if they stay, see if they stick it out. It is a last turn of the game type of play. They could potentially just play a big card in Dark Dimension, and that could be potentially problematic. But I think with Shadow King, we have a lot of chance to bring their card back down to a reasonable level. Victory. And we do end up getting the retreat. Probably a good thing, unless they had just some raw power to play into the right location. I think we probably had that one locked in, and that's what this deck can do. It doesn't have any, like, it's not doing necessarily a game plan of its own, other than putting high value, low cost cards on the board and high value, low cost counters in things like Shadow King, things like Red Guardian, things like Mobius, Killmonger. We're going to go ahead and take it. Let's jump over into the next one. All right, next up we have fellow content creator Husky Puppies, ETV. The first location is Camp Lehi. And so out of the deal, we get a Viper, which we're probably never going to use unless we get something like Shadow Village that we have a negative ninja. But most likely, we're just going to have that on the board. So we can do Invisible Woman. I think we play it to the left. That allows us to get some bonus on our cards in mid. Things like Mobius, depending on what kind of deck they're running. Mobius can completely derail a game plan. It can completely derail a Pixie deck. Any kind of deck that wants to run a Sarah and leans heavily onto that Sarah reduction. Just a lot of good utility that you can get from it. I think we're going to do Mobius next turn. It's probably a Jeff plus a Maximus hidden behind the Invisible One location. And then we can kind of go from there. So they have Luke Cage. We're not going to be able to discount any of their cards, but it doesn't tell us a whole lot. I kind of like the idea of if they're so worried about their cards being reduced, maybe we just slap their Luke Cage with Red Guardian. We're not using all of our energy. We're going to have one left over. I think that's okay, especially if we end up drawing Sarah. That gives us a lot of value here. So Luke Cage is no longer protective. The Green Goblin in the left lane is unfortunate and rather mean. We can still potentially get a bonus on that left lane with the Miss Marvel, but is it worth it? I don't know if that's marvelous enough. Maximus hidden here would break the Miss Marvel bonus. Maybe we don't need to go that line. We could always try to send the Green Goblin back with Viper, but it's very, very risky as a play. I think we're going to go something simple like this. Next turn, maybe like a Miss Marvel plus a Maximus. We could always move guess these two over to the right and just drop Miss Marvel into mid plus the Maximus into mid, and that's where we would be competing for. And we get the extra support to the left and to the right. Has a 4 cost coming in at 14 power across the board and relatively easy to set up. So we have 2 coming down. We have the Cosmo in the left, and we have Ravona in mid. Ravona's not going to discount any of their cards. It does look like they're in a pretty tough spot with Luke Cage. Cosmo to the left, I think, is fine. It looks like it may be from Camp Lehi, yeah. So I like the idea of doing this. This is 2, this is 3, so we're going to be a positive 5 in the left lane. Gives us a good push here, gives us a good push here. That's fine. We don't need any on reveals in that left lane. I think this is exactly how we want to end it. And we do end up getting the retreat. I think maybe the Mobius disrupting the Ravona line. They probably didn't have an optimal play line or draw. And then Luke Cage not protecting their cards anymore. I think just overall, between a mix of a bad draw and some bad counters, I think we were able to force them into an unwinnable line. We'll take the 1. Let's go ahead and jump over into the next one. All right, next up we have Falls Hope. The first location is Quantum Tunnel. We typically don't have a lot of high value cards that are sitting or aren't able to play, and so we may not want to go for a rotation roulette too often. They do rotate their Snow Guard in exchange for a early game Loki, which is so unfortunate. We can't even get Mobius down early enough to stop their early discount on these cards. And so we're just kind of stuck with it for now, which I think is maybe fine. They get a good read off of turn 1 of what kind of deck we're running. They get 5 of our 12 cards. It is what it is. And they did snap, but there's not really a whole lot that we're super concerned about. And then Snow Guardian again into the rotation. Craziness. Into a Mobius of their own. Such a huge benefit. So we're not going to play Sarah this game. We know that for sure. We have a Mobius of our own. I'm going to go ahead and play him into the right lane, just in case we need to set up a Miss Marvel at some point. Right now, ooh, took out our Jeff. Their cards are no longer going to be reduced, which is great. Ours can't be either, so the Sarah for either of us would be useless. Maximus is good at helping push back up that Ronan. We can take out their Mobius into a Sarah play next turn. There is the chance, because this was a rotation, there is a chance that they have a copy of our Mobius, but we don't know for sure. And so we take out their Mobius in the left lane. If they want to stop us from the Sarah discount, they would have to play one of their own. But I'm not sure if it's worth doing that or just playing the Ronan outright. Just in case they play ours outright. And because of that, because I am a bit scared of that possibility, I think I'm going to play Ronan to the right. We do have Maximus to make their plays a little bit less optimal. I'm glad we opted for the Ronan and not the Sarah play. So they did have a second Mobius. They have Jeff, and so now 2 Jeffs on the board are craziness. But because we went with that line, we could do something like Maximus and Gladiator. I'm going to go for it. I think there's some cases where they can outshine us, especially if they top deck their Shang-Chi after Loki triggered. And so 1 Jeff over to the right, 1 card over to the right in the Snow Guard. And then they also have 1 card to the left in Shadow King. Shadow King's not going to help them much. With our Maximus, I think we're able to bring it up to a point. Oh, that was so close. We're able to bring Ronan up to a point where we are able to overcome the Necrosha lane. We win mid, courtesy of the Gladiator pulling something that we could handle. Looks like Cersei was in the mix. Could have been devastating. It didn't look like Jubilee triggered because they don't have anything left in their deck. We will gladly take the 4 cubes against a tough Loki match. Loki decks are always really intimidating because they know your resources sometimes better than what you know that they have. They have an idea of almost your entire deck whenever a good trigger or combination goes off. and by turn 1, we were still able to find a way to bring it back home, find a way to win. We'll take the 4. Let's jump over into the next one. All right, next up we have Edevan 1513. First location is Limbo. We do have Nocturne to kind of take it out, so if it looks like they're going to get a better bang for the buck out of that location than we do, then we can definitely take it away. Edevan has Red Hulk in their hand already, and then Space Throne in mid, I think is, I don't know. If they have White Widow, it definitely comes down in Space Throne. Probably not a snap into it because that becomes kind of transparent, but Angela, as long as they don't have like a Luke Cage, then we do get the ability to set that back to base. We have Killmonger. We can maybe hide it behind like an Invisible Woman. Nocturne can either change Space Throne or Limbo. We can decide on one or the other, but not both. This deck that they're running, it looks like just like an Angela, Kitty Pryde, potentially Thena. I'm not sure what their high end is going to be, but for us, Ronan could be that card that allows us to come over the top. I'm going to go ahead and do, I think, Red Guardian now, and I'll play Gladiator to the right. Red Guardian is going to take away that ability for Angela to continue scaling, so it doesn't become an absolute menace. And we have Killmonger to take out the Nebula, so even if we let it scale a little bit, it's a 2 cost right now. If we get Sarah, it's a 1 cost, and then we can take it out on the last turn of the game. But we'll see. I know that this deck, a lot of these decks, really lean very heavily on scaling Angela high and fast. Nocturne cannot change Space Throne. Nocturne cannot change Limbo because of what happened here. We do have the opportunity, if we draw into Miss Marvel, to come over the top of, even if they get a Jeff into that left lane. But I think for now we play Sarah. We can't change this one, so a Miss Marvel wouldn't allow us any extra bonus here, but it could give us that reach we need in the left lane. With the extra Sarah reduction, I'm not going to play Maximus this turn. I'm going to hold him. And then we have Ronan as well to give another kind of surprise power push if we don't draw into Miss Marvel. And so it leaves our options a little bit more open. So they have Nocturne. They're not going to be able to play it in Limbo. And then Havoc comes down. And so they're going to lock themselves at 5 energy. I think we skip here 3 and 3. We're only able to play a max of 2 cards. So if we play next turn, or if we get Miss Marvel next turn, that's going to be our key to winning the left lane and the right lane. I assume that they have a Jeff since they snapped back. But they did only lock themselves at 5 energy. So a Red Hulk is not likely. I forgot that Nocturne can move. Oh no. That's a tough lesson. You only learn it. You only have to learn it once. I knew that Professor X allowed moved cards to go in there, but it just didn't register. It was set in the old way of thinking, forgetting that Nocturne can move into that lane. We ended up losing a big 8-cube wager. That one hurts. But you learn from those losses, and that's the one we're going to learn from the most. All right, next up we have Coco Bird, and we're not going to let an 8-cube wager make us do something silly like turn 1. No, we're fine. Murder World doesn't really hurt us. Atelan might hurt us a touch, but it's not awful either. I'm going to go ahead and play Invisible Woman. It might be that I play Maximus just out onto the board because the cards are going to shuffle anyways. So what does it matter if they draw additional cards? With them having Ravonna, I definitely want to try to play Mobius if we draw him. And so if we draw him, that's going to be our primary card to play. With them snapping, what is the snap for? We could play the Maximus, but I'm just going to go ahead and hide a Killmonger. I'm guessing they have some really good line here, but I'm going to hope to be able to best it. So they did have Bishop, they have Ant-Man. We have Killmonger hidden behind the Invisible Woman play. So unless they can protect it in some way, shape, or form, that might give us a lot of... wow. Sakaar pulls after Atelan now? Wild. So we're only going to have a handful of resources. So their Quinjet comes down. They will get a reduction on any cards that they copy, so maybe they have a weird Loki line, but I doubt it. Seeing this, I honestly don't know what they're running. But for good measure, I'm gonna leave Nocturne here. We're gonna play Jeff over to the left. We have Ronan that we can also hide into mid to give us a lot of power, explosive power in that middle location. And then we're looking to draw something like Shadow King. Gladiator might do us some favors, but also might not. And definitely like a Shadow King, a Red Guardian would be decent. But we'll of course see. Now, depending on how many 1-cost cards they have, Moon Girl on turn 6, so no energy was skipped. Interesting. So their cards are discounted because of the Moon Girl play. So the doubled up cards with Quinjet, with potentially Ravonna, could be pretty bad. I think that makes Sage, like the duplicated Sage, 1. Wild. Let's do all in to the left. We do all in to the right. Let's do all in to the right instead. We're gonna do the shimmy shake. We're gonna do this number. We're gonna praise that they're not able to flood as much as I think they're gonna be able to flood. Worst case scenario, we take out their Ant-Man mid. That's a big push. We take out, ooh, okay, Iron Man. Duplicated Iron Man? No, okay, ooh, duplicated Mystique. Definitely a mistake to lean that heavily on it, but that is a lot of iron people going around. Sage, interesting. So the Gladiator could hurt us here. No, okay, no, we're fine. Gladiator comes in. Shadow King is going to set that right lane just awfully low, and then Killmonger is going to help us clean it out. We have a lot of big power in mid. They definitely have us beat in the left lane. That was stacked awfully high. We will take the 4 and just the counter components. That does help ease the loss of 8 earlier. I'm still mourning those 8 cubes. Let's go ahead and jump over into one more. All right, next up we have the Freezing Cold. The first location is Machine World, and so we're going to avoid that one for a while. New York is a decent location. We can always move cards over. Kind of like the idea of just doing like an Invisible Woman. That way we can start hiding some of those key counter plays. So White Widow, unfortunately, but we can always move Widow's Kiss over into mid by the end of the game if we want to. We'll see. We do have Mobius. We're going to go ahead and probably prioritize that here, just in case. There's so many decks that try to leverage that card cost reduction. It's so strong, and so many decks try to leverage it, that I think a Mobius is just kind of a flexible, good tool for some of those builds. Now, we do have 4 energy. It might be worthwhile to do a Miss Marvel. By the end of the game, we're going to have to cap out Asteroid M, or else Miss Marvel gets yanked over there. We don't want that. We don't want Miss Marvel to get yanked. So maybe we just do this. We let them know that we have the Miss Marvel, and that we intend to move it into New York on the last turn. That loses a big element of surprise, though. So we're going to leave it like this for now, and then we'll get a sense for the rest of the build. So they have a Shang-Chi in their hand now. Iron Lad ends up pulling Shang-Chi. So we have Sarah. Great card, great cost reduction. Let's go ahead and play it. And I think that should maybe allow us to cap out the right location with something like Ronan. And then we could do, maybe we do Ronan mid and Maximus to the right. So we have a 0, a 3, a 5, and a 2. We don't do Maximus to the right. Courtesy of the Black Bolt play. Super interesting, but I think we definitely need to hide the Ronan here. I'm going to do this because I think they pull cards out of Asteroid M, and so I don't know if they backfill it necessarily. So the Maximus in the left, unfortunate. They got the copy with the Mirage. What do they play in the right lane as well? Because that was 2, Miss Marvel is 4, and so I think we overcome the right lane with our Miss Marvel bonus. It's not going to yank over an Asteroid M, courtesy of us capping it out. And then Ronan comes in over the top of that middle location. We're able to steal it away with the kind of surprise play of what Invisible Woman is hiding. Allows us to kind of sneak some extra power onto the board. And so we will take the 2 where we can. We're right back in it. We're just down -2 from that big 8 cube loss. Let's go ahead and jump over into one more, try to get back to even. All right, next up we have Alex. The first location is Krakoa. Besides Gladiator, I guess Nocturne's a decent hit there. We see Quinjet right off the jump, so it looks like a Loki deck. And I think we're okay with that, honestly. We have Maximus, which will allow them to draw additional cards, but it's also going to make our next draw +6. And so I think it's a trade-off we're willing to take here. We have Killmonger that's going to help us win back this right location within TVA. And then we'll kind of go... Actually, Red Guardian into the Angela is going to be monstrous. Absolutely monstrous. And then it's a Shadow King coming in at +6, but it's going to get set back down to +2. And so I think it's fine. Let's go ahead and snap here. I think Red Guardian is going to help us steal TVA. And then we have the double drop of like a Shadow King Jeff on the last turn, which is not anything awful. I was angling more for Killmonger, but with Wakanda popping up the right, very fortunate for them. But that card is now protected. They have Thena in the right lane. I did not want or need to see Thena. Now, interesting here as well, they can just cancel out TVA. So how committed are we to this? 6 power in the left lane, does that win? I think so. The 3 power here, so 6 here, does that win? Maybe. I think they used the Hawk to cancel out TVA. And so because of that, I don't want to burn Shadow King. That's my gut. Let's see how good my gut is. So there is the Hawk. It does cancel out these until the end of next turn. So we can actually take out that Quinjet now, which is, I think, very fun. But I also don't think it's necessarily the optimal line. I mean, if they do Loki here, that Quinjet reduction is massive. But so is our Shadow King at offsetting this. We're going to play Sarah and see. I do wish we had Mobius to just stop the Quinjet, stop the Loki discount. But since we don't, it actually becomes very scary very quickly. This middle location, I don't know that they ever have anything super large. Because our Ronan himself is not going to be that big. And so double drop in the left. We have the Red Guardian. Good power swing. And then we have the Snow Guard Bear. And so they didn't get any kind of bonus from Krakoa. But we get the discount here. I think something like Ronan... Ronan Shadow King? Or do we avoid that and go something like Miss Marvel into the Shadow King, which is going to bring us 4, 5, 6, 11 power. It sets Thena down. And then we get to do this as well. I kind of like this. I don't know that they have a huge play that they push 4 in mid. And so I like kind of spreading the power out versus the Ronan. I wish Shadow King wasn't going to set himself back to 0, but it is what it is. We do get the retreat for 2 against the Loki deck. They didn't. It looks like they probably didn't draw into their Loki in time, or they didn't think it was going to be beneficial enough. We will take the 2 cubes where we can. Let's go ahead and jump over into the next one. All right, next up we have rank 84 W. W always comes out with some really interesting cooks, some really interesting builds, and so I'm curious what they're running. I know earlier it was like a Professor X Magneto lockdown deck, and so Professor X lockdown a lane, Magneto to pull your 3 and 4 your 3 and 4 cost cards out of the locked down lane. These locations are super restrictive so far. I almost don't want to play Invisible Woman here. I think this is fine. We're okay with Morag, but lockdown after 4 is tough. And so I want to do Invisible Woman. We can play Nocturne next turn and then move her over into Kiln. And so Monster Island comes down. That's fine. Ravona here is interesting. If we draw Mobius, probably get quite a bit of value from it. Ravona's everywhere. Like, I thought she would lose a lot of her hits whenever Professor X died. She still seems all over the place. Maybe with the Athena stuff and a few other builds, it's worthwhile. Curious to see. Curious to see if her utility holds up. So they have Hope Summers in the left lane, so they're looking to kind of ramp up rather quickly. I think I'm going to Nocturne move over. And we're going to hide Gladiator. Next time we can do Sarah. And that's going to allow us to play into Morag a bit easier. Now, if they're wanting to do Professor X on 5 to lock us out, we do have the Kiln location. Athena, we get a copy of it. We get a copy of their Jeff as well, which is so wild. And they didn't get a copy of our Red Guardian yet. Super wild. And then we draw a Jeff of our own. It's a shark's tail. This is just a beautiful, beautiful lineup. I'm going to play Sarah, and that's going to allow us a lot of flexibility in how and where we position these cards. We could always angle and try to do something like a Shadow King to cancel out their Athena. It would trigger after it's scaled at the end of the turn. Because this is at the end of the turn, this is at the end of the game. And so our Shadow King would still set her back down to 1. And so we wouldn't have to worry about her still being 4 after the fact. And so I kind of like the idea. And so Jeff gets moved over, Elsa Bloodstone. They're going to get a bump on the Kitty Pride that it looks like they drew in too late. We're not going to be able to draw here, courtesy of them just flooding us with stuff. But it's fine. It's all good. We are all good. I do like the Shadow King here, though. Shadow King, that allows us to then do maybe Ronan mid. And we're not even going to use their Jeff. Although it's cute and it's gold and ours is just base. We have to like our Jeff. Depending on how many cards they play, I think this has a good shot at winning. We already have the advantage in the right lane. If they play here and here, then I think we have a shot at Ronan being more than whatever they drop here. With Shadow King, we're going to set Athena down to 0 so we can win the left lane. Let's see what happens. A triple drop, so not going with the Athena bonus. Iron Man unfortunately makes it so we are not winning the Monster Island lane in any way, shape, or form. And then the last drop of Havoc in the right lane. So our Ronan is going to be just barely more than their doubled up Jeff. And I mean just barely. If Gladiator pulls something that it can't destroy, it's unfortunate. And Shadow King comes in and pushes it back up, back down to 0 with Sage. Even though Gladiator couldn't destroy it, we got fortunate there. Athena went back down to base, and we were able to, very fortunately, hold down mid. Had they played Havoc here, they could have stolen this one away. I'm glad they didn't. We will gladly take the 2.